Hello, my name is Wiktor Öhman, and in this video tutorial I'm going to show you how to create realistic, real-time scenes in Unreal Engine 4 using Megascans surfaces, 3D scatter assets, and how to use Quixel Mixer to create new, unique surfaces from Megascans materials, and how to use them to create a new scene with a completely different look. The footage you're seeing now is all captured in Unreal Engine 4 and is dynamically lit using a single directional light. These scenes are just simple, straight roads, and I'll show you the basics here. I'll go over creating more complex urban scenes in future videos. I'll be going over how to set up a material for the road using Megascans textures, how to set up and use decals, how to import and scatter Megascans 3D assets, and I'll be showing you the Quixel Mixer. So let's get started. Here I am in Unreal Engine 4 version 4.16, and I've got a blueprint actor placed here, which is a road building script we'll be releasing on the marketplace shortly. This allows me to quickly create both straight and curved roads by specifying the length, the segment meshes, materials, and more. Even without this script, making a road using these assets is a breeze. Let's go ahead and add a couple segments. You can add as many as your hardware can handle, but I think I'll go with 4 for this example. The repetitions you see in the street is a simple mask that you can switch out for whatever you want. It won't be as noticeable once we start adding decals. This script is already set up with some stock assets and materials, as you can see here, but these can easily be switched out, removed, or modified to your liking. I like this though, I just need to add some more variation and wear and tear to it. Let's do that by adding some decals. Here you can see a couple of textures for a large decal from Megascans. It's ready to be placed in the world, so let's go ahead and do that. Information on how the material is set up is available in the description. I'll just drag this material instance into the world and adjust the size a bit. And seeing as the textures are non-square, I'll need to adjust the ratio of it slightly. There we go. Looking good. Let's add some more. I'll speed this part up a bit, but what I'm doing here is the same thing as I did before. I'm dragging out the decal materials onto the ground. And the most important thing to keep in mind here is to keep it believable. Keep lots of photo reference at hand. These lines can be added automatically using the road builder script, but I'm doing it manually for maximum creative control. Roads are usually much more of a patchwork than you might think. And don't be afraid to use different types of asphalt on the same road, as it's not uncommon at all in the real world. And seeing as these materials are all from Megascans, it means they all have the same and correct color calibration. So what I'm doing now is that I'm adding more decals and I'm trying to blend them in with the underlying material nicely. Next up I'm gonna add a large patch, which you see where roads have been repaired. They're usually of lower quality and a lot rougher than the surrounding original asphalt. These kinds of decals really help break up the surface and adds a lot of visual fidelity. Now I'm adding a decal which will run along the sides of the road, and it connects the curb and sidewalk very nicely with the road. I'll just go ahead and tile this up all along the segments on both sides. As I mentioned previously, roads in the real world host incredible amounts of variations in surface types and materials, and this isn't something you usually notice unless you look for it. Alright, so let's add some lines to the sides as well. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, the pavement tiles are very broken up. I'll go ahead and add a decal here and there with an intact tile. So what's nice about this is that it's got a slightly different tint. So it helps make the pavement look more worn down, which is exactly what I want. As I mentioned previously, information on how the material was created is available in the description below. Alright, so I'll just go ahead and add some more decals to the pavement and curb before we move on to adding some scatter assets to the scene. There we go, starting to shape up. Next up, I'll add some 3D assets from Megascans. In this case, some bashed up boxes like cigarette boxes, fries boxes, and so on. I'll do this by using the foliage painter. What I like to do is to just let it randomize when I paint and then erase what I don't like. I do a couple passes to get results that I really like. This will look slightly out of place in a rather clean looking road as it currently is, but it will look great once we start adding some other debris as well. Okay, before we start adding more debris, I want to breathe some additional life into the scene. So let's go ahead and add some grass to add between the cracks. Here's the Megascans library, which contains thousands upon thousands of real-world scans, both 2D and 3D. Let's find some grass in here. For this scene, it will be easier to use ready-made 3D grass and just repurpose it, so let's go into the 3D category instead. This one will work perfectly, so let's go over the download settings and get going. Alright, so here we are in Maya. I'll just go ahead and drag the downloaded 3D grass into the viewport and I'll assign the textures real quick. The first thing I'll do is group the tufts together so that they're a bit easier to manage for now. I'll then drag them out in a rough line. Next up, I'll tighten the line up a bit, making it easier to fit between the cracks and tiles. I'll also tighten it up a bit so that the grass is a bit more tightly packed. I find it's very easy to do this using the orthogonal views. The next step is completely optional, but I find it helps. I'll use the lattice modifier to scale the bottom more tightly together and make the top flare out a bit more. And lastly, I'll just pack it up a bit more. And there we go. Before we export, let's just make sure it's placed properly in the world origin. Since I made this tutorial, roadside plants have been released, which will work perfectly in this scenario. But we're gonna stick with our modified grass, that also looks great. That's a good thing about Megascans, it's highly versatile and creative, and there are new things added every day. Okay, so let's import our grass into Unreal Engine 4. Alright, and let's set up the material. I'll just drop and plug in all the textures into their corresponding slots. And please don't be a moron like me and forget to set up the transparency settings. And there we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and place it in our scene. I'll start off by scaling it down a bit. There we go. I'll just add a couple of parameters to let me adjust the color and brightness of it. I want it to be a bit darker and more desaturated. Great! Okay, so let's populate the scene with it. I'll put some grass where the asphalt meets the curb as well. Now that both sides are filled with grass, I'll just make a quick adjustment to the saturation. Perfect. Let's move on to adding some more debris. I'll just go back to the Megascans library and search for 3D assets. I'll then go into the scatter category. These ones at the bottom will do perfectly. In the downloader settings, you can specify the target engine or renderer, or you can just adjust the settings manually. I'll go with just a couple of the textures as the assets will be so tiny, but I'll download more just in case. I can always go back and download the entire texture set, should I want to. Alright, here are the assets in Unreal. I've already loaded them in the foliage painter, so I just need to adjust a couple settings before I paint them out. You'll see that small details like this really make a huge difference. I'll make sure the largest concentration of pebbles go at the middle and the edges of the road, as that's where the fewest cars go. Once again, I'm painting out large areas and going back erasing, back and forth until I find a nice balance. Next I'm going to add some leaves. I got these from Megascans as well, and they're imported the exact same way as the previous assets. These leaves will almost exclusively be in the gutter area, and I'll be using them pretty sparsely. And there we go! Lastly, I'll paint out some more small clutter. This time small pieces of wood and twigs. These are also downloaded from Megascans. There we go, I'd say that's enough debris. Let's set up the scene for presentation. I've loaded a cluster of placeholder trees that I use for the sole purpose of shadow casting, and they do a great job at that. This is a technique I love to use for diorama type scenes, as it adds a lot of depth and makes the scene seem larger and richer. Next, I'll pilot a cinematic camera, which is set to simulate a DSLR camera. I'll add a link that shows the settings of this camera in the description below. Almost there! Let's adjust the aperture and focus just slightly. I'd say we got it! Let's try and do something completely different. I'd like to change the theme of the street and go for more of a Middle Eastern theme using Quixel Mixer. So let's open it up. So here I am in the new and upcoming version of Quixel Mixer, and we'll be revealing all of the new and awesome features in an upcoming video. I'll start off by loading the base pavement material we used in the Unreal scene. There we go! I'll just set the repetitions to 1. Alright, let's jazz it up a bit. I'll load this painted floor tile material. Let me adjust the repetitions here real quick so that it matches up the tiling of the underlying material. Awesome. Next, I'll adjust the radius and threshold settings to wear the edges of the tiles down a bit. Next, let's dirty it up a bit by adding a dust layer. I'll open up the browser and select this material, which is pretty coarse and will work very nicely. Next, I'll adjust the blend settings until I get a result I'm happy with. There we go! Above this layer, I'll add a noise layer, which will let me adjust a procedural displacement pattern, which will in turn affect the blending of the layers above it. In the previous version of the mixer, this was part of each normal material layer, but this structure allows for much greater freedom. Above this layer, I'll add another dirt layer. I'll start off by adjusting the albedo color to make it blend better with the underlying surface. Next, I'll change it to From Above and adjust the blending settings. I'll set the radius higher for a softer blend. Alright, we're getting there. The final layer will be another version of the pavement tiles. I'll use this layer to further define the wear and tear of the colored tiles. This is one of the things that I really love about the mixer. It allows for so much creativity and experimentation, and everything is completely non-destructive, meaning you can go back and change the layers at any time. I'm happy with the blend, but I want to quickly tweak the noise layer to further define the distribution of the wear. There we go. Now I'll just set the repetition to 1 and we're good to go. I'm really happy with this result, so let's go ahead and export it for Unreal Engine 4. To export, simply head into the Export tab. In this case, I'll set it to a 4K resolution and TGA as the export format. The default settings look good, except for the normal, which needs to have its green channel inverted. I'll fix this by changing it to normal Y inverted. Alright, so here we are, back in Unreal Engine 4. This scene is a bare-bones, scaled-back version of the previous scene, with the exception of a different curb. Let's transform it into a Middle Eastern style environment. I've got my new textures loaded in, so all we need to do is plug them into a material. I'll use the same material as the existing pavement, but I'll just switch out the textures. And there we go. And seeing as we specify the green channel to be inverted in the exporter, we don't need to flip it in engine. Let's apply the material. And that's looking awesome. Now we just need to match up the other materials. I'll start with the painted stripes. I'll just select them all, duplicate the material, change the tint, and we've got ourselves some Middle Eastern looking stripes. I've also created a real quick variation of the asphalt in the mixer, where I added some dust and fine debris, as well as a small tint change. So let's apply that as well. It's really coming together. Let me adjust the tint of the pavement and start switching out some of the materials for the decals with more yellow tinted versions. That's looking more like it. Alright, the colors are really coming together now. Let's start painting out some debris like in the previous scene. Okay, I re-added the debris. Let's add something new to the mix. Here I'm using the rubble assets. They're not color matched yet, so I'll go ahead and tweak that later, but the shapes fit in real nicely. I'll start by adjusting the intensity, and I think they need to be a bit brighter. I'll also need to adjust the saturation slightly, but I think the distribution is looking real good. Alright, let's tweak the rubble's color. I'm using a desaturation node here with a negative value to increase the saturation. There we go, I'm getting happy with this. So let's set up a nice presentation render. And I'll start by piloting the cinematic camera. Let's do a bit of a close-up. Something like this. Yeah, that'll work. Let's set up the depth of field and adjust the color grading. The white balance is a very important part of setting the mood, and in this case I want it to be a bit warmer than the default settings. And lastly, I'll just increase the intensity of the ambient occlusion. There we go! Same base textures, but taken through the mixer, and we got ourselves a completely different theme from across the globe. Let's head back to the original scene for a moment, where I prepared a wetness parameter. By tweaking this, I can instantly change the atmosphere of the scene with a click of a button. Creating a wetness slider like this is incredibly easy to do, and I'll cover this in an upcoming video. Once I'm happy with the wetness, I'll switch out the lighting for a darker version, refresh the reflection captures, and switch cameras. I prepared a couple of neon lights and placed them in the scene for a more fitting, dramatic lighting scenario. I kept building on this scene using some more advanced techniques, which I will cover in an upcoming tutorial, so be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon not to miss it. And that's it for this tutorial. I hope you learned something new, and thank you for watching!